That would be our chance to push into their territory. If he is really that powerful, then perhaps we won T lose as many knights. Nimble thought it would be great if that was how it worked out. He heard from his fellow knights in the 4 Lightning and Heavy Bomber that Aintz's power was on another level. They said he might be able to use a spell that could kill thousands at once, or tens of thousands if they were bunched up. It sounded unlikely, but if those two said it, there was a high probability it was true. Carveen was right that the deaths of the professional warriors who kept the peace in the Empire would be a huge loss. Nimble would have been happier if their potential enemy Aintz was powerless, but in this case, he wanted to believe his friends. "Oh, General, there was one more favor I wanted to ask. The King of Darkness will bring soldiers with him, so please allow them to fight alongside you." "Oh. How many thousands are we talking about?" "Well, I am terribly sorry to interrupt, General Carveen, so Nimble," someone shouted from outside the tent. Carveen apologized to Nimble with a look and shouted toward the entrance. "Permission to enter granted." The one who came in was a fairly high-ranking knight. "What is it? It must be an emergency." "Sir, a carriage bearing the flag of the King of Darkness has arrived before the gate. We are being asked to open it. Shall we welcome them as you ordered?" The knight was looking to Nimble. Carveen then glanced at Nimble. In response, Nimble gave a nod. "Understood. Let it through at once." "Yes, sir. Should we inspect the carriage first?" No matter who was inside, they couldn't let a carriage into the garrison without inspecting it. A basic inspection included using magic to make sure there weren't any illusions being used as disguises. In the kingdom, they didn't go as far as to use magic during their inspections. Probably the only place that had a rule like this was the Empire, where magic was a pillar of the state. They knew how terrifying magic could be, so their guard against it was high. At a major military facility like this, they were using the cutting edge in magic technology. If the technology supporting the future of the country was to be leaked, it would be a devastating loss for the Empire. That was why the system was set up, so that even if Emperor Jerkniv came, they performed the same inspection. Thus, even if the carriage hailed from an allied country, and perhaps precisely because it was from an allied country, examining the carriage was the usual course of action. But there were some situations that wouldn't allow for that. Carveen looked at Nimble again, pained by a leaden feeling and a slight pressure in his stomach, plus the weight of the object in his breast pocket. Nimble replied, "General Carveen, I am truly sorry, but this man is a very important visitor for the Empire. This is an extraordinary irregularity, an exception among exceptions, but please just let him in." The general's gentle smile changed to a blank look, and the color drained out of his face. He realized the knight was taking Nimble's order over his head. No matter how kind a person, there weren't many who would be happy to have their subordinate take orders from someone else, and Nimble understood that very well. But it had to be done. If all else fails, as he was wondering whether to take out the item in his breast pocket, Carveen spoke. "I can argue if it is His Imperial Majesty's orders. It is his country after all. I am glad you understand, General." In his pocket were written orders from the Emperor. The writing on the parchment gave the person named therein the authority of the Emperor. That granted Nimble authority over anything and everything associated with the war. Not only did it make Nimble higher ranking than Carveen for the duration of this conflict, he could even dismiss the general if the situation called for it. Relieved that his friendly relationship hadn't broken down with the older man he respected, he reined in his emotions because now wasn't the time. "Well, shall we have a look at this King of Darkness, whom the Emperor treats as such an exception? He must be a match for the great heroes." Personally, Nimble didn't really want to go. Recalling the warnings of the other 4, well, only 3 now, including himself, his face became somber. But there was no way he could choose to not go. "Of course I'll accompany you, General Carveen." At the edge of the barracks, a single magnificent carriage was quietly proceeding. A knight guided it. Surprisingly, there was no driver. The horses weren't normal horses. They weren't Sleipnirs either. They were magical beasts with scales. Nimble alerted the knights and Carveen, "Please give your deepest bows." "What?" was the expression on all of their faces. Nimble understood the feeling well. Deepest bow was correct protocol for welcoming the king of an allied country, but for a visit to a military base, there was no established protocol. Or rather, it was assumed such a visit would never happen. It was extraordinarily rare to be so open, even when both parties were human. Conflicts breaking out between countries were simply reality. Deepest bows were for ceremonies in public in safety, not at military bases. That's what the soldiers were thinking. There was one more thing. Deepest bows were almost never given on the battlefield. Most likely, if someone saw their commander giving the deepest possible bow, they might mistake the person on the receiving end as a superior commander. It was an unspoken rule on the battlefield. He understood the knight's feelings so much it pained him. But everyone, your deepest bows, please. He repeated it with a steely voice. He heard Carveen sigh. You heard him. We were welcoming this carriage with our deepest bows. When Carveen gave the order, the confused knights seemed relieved. If it was an order, all they had to do was obey. No thinking was necessary. Nimble gave him a grateful glance and saw a snide look on Carveen's face for just a moment. It was as if Carveen was saying, you have it tough, but I have it tougher. The carriage came to a halt in front of the party. They all gasped for two reasons. First, the carriage was magnificent. The primary color was black, gleaming as if cut from the sea at night. The frame was covered with elaborate gold accents, but the metal fixtures had the dull shine particular to brass. And the leather displayed a sophisticated coppery hue, so the overall effect was elegant. Perhaps the ornamentation was a bit showy, but the carriage radiated such refinement that it seemed natural. Calling it a treasure chest wouldn't be far off. Nimble had ridden in the Emperor's carriage many times, so he could state with confidence that this one was grander. The other reason they gasped was the horses. They were NT horses, exactly. Sharp fangs peeked out of their growling mouths. Reptilian scales coated their bodies completely, and beneath those rippled abnormally robust muscles. It was like overpowering violence had been molded into the shape of a horse. An acute sense of caution filled the area. Nimble himself was breathing heavily and felt sweat ooze from his back and hands. The magical beast seemed shockingly strong. As he breathed raggedly in and out, the carriage's door opened. A dark elf girl got out. His mind went blank. Everyone was speechless, their eyes caught by her. The girl, holding a black staff, was lovely. She was so beautiful that once she grew up, she would captivate many. Undoubtedly, some men would do anything for her love. Her timid expression was reminiscent of a flower blooming stunningly in the moonlight, but she had equipment on her hands that didn't match her appearance. She wore gauntlets. The one on her left hand looked like something she'd pulled off an evil creature, like a demon. Its sinister shape was mainly black. Twisted thorns jutted out with sharp points. Though it seemed to be made of metal, it had a grimy sparkle, like it was emitting a bizarre secretion. Just the sight of it sent horror coursing through Nimble's body. It felt like his very soul rejected it. On her right hand, however, was a gauntlet reminiscent of a pure, innocent girl. It had a smooth make with a base color of snow white. Mysterious gold patterns ran the length of it. Even that decoration served only to further its beauty. This was what it meant to be captivated. It was like standing before a peerlessly beautiful woman. The gauntlet seemed about to suck in his soul. Oh, our Lord Aints, it seems that we've arrived. I see. Thanks, Mayor. Then someone else appeared. For a moment the air felt still. Everyone got goosebumps at once. The presence flooding the area was different from someone intending to kill, but it was difficult to describe. Aints Ulgaun was dressed like many arcane casters. First, he wore a raven black robe, then a cape on top of that, also black. This was strange. Next, he held a staff that was splendidly ornate, but not gaudy. Around his neck hung a necklace featuring a jewel that sparkled silver. His face was covered with a weird mask. We humbly welcome you, King of Darkness, Aints Ulgaun. Nimble bowed, but he didn't hear anyone else. Though he knew it was rude, he moved his head to look behind him. He saw that the general and the other knights were all still standing stiff as rods. Overawed by the King of Darkness's presence, they couldn't move. He understood how they felt, but it was a problem. The general, as expected, offered a helping hand when Nimble began to panic. Men, Carveen barked. It was the tone of a commander. It was more imposing than anyone would have imagined from this man with such an aristocratic aura. Your deepest bows for the King of Darkness. Yes, sir. A multitude of voices acknowledged the order as they all offered their deepest bows together. I appreciate the welcome, famous knights of the Empire. The King of Darkness's utterly normal voice was conversely creepy. There was a strange incongruity. It was like he was putting in a lot of effort to act like a normal person. At least that was the strong sense Nimble got because he had heard what was lying under the mask. Raise your heads. No one raised their heads the first time he said it. You raise your heads. The second time they did. Only for the ruler of their own country would they wait for a third. King of Darkness, please forgive those who did not immediately raise their heads. He shifted his gaze and saw that the knights' lips were white, their faces pale. It seems they've forgotten themselves in their joy at meeting you. No, I apologize. It seems I got a little excited before the battlefield. Please know that it was not my intention to direct it at you. Aints whipped aside the cape that had been draped over his shoulder. The raven-black fabric fluttered audibly as it spread out, almost like black wings. At that same instant, whatever had been enveloping the area in what could be called a chill or heaviness melted away. Nothing was left. Standing before them was someone with the presence of any normal human. Terrifying. That was Nimble's genuine impression. He had heard from his fellow knights what a monster this was. The fact that he could seem so normal made him all the more frightening. It was like a large predatory beast was slowly sidling up to them. Even the knights who didn't know the details must have been struck by the abnormality of the situation. Confusion hung in the air. From Carveen, Nimble sensed comprehension. He must have understood what attitude he needed to take with this person before him, not with his mind, but with his heart and soul. My name is Nimble Arkdale Anok, and I will guide you to the site of your camp. Oh. Well, I am sorry to trouble you, but thank you. You are quite welcome. Allow me to introduce a commander of the Imperial Army, General Carveen. My name is Carveen, King of Darkness, Aints Ul Gaun. If you are dissatisfied with any aspect of the base, I am at your service, and it will be handled immediately. I'd like to offer a few knights as attendants. That one be necessary. I have my subordinate here. Aints pointed at the dark elf girl. And if anything goes wrong, I'll take care of it myself, within reason. Carveen stiffened. His offer included the intention of attaching some monitors to make sure the caster didn't do anything strange. They were in a military compound after all, but the reply he received was a flat refusal. Only someone with power would be able to give such an answer. But Carveen, in his position, couldn't let that go. At this rate, they wouldn't get anywhere, no matter how far they went. Nimble was mentally on Carveen's side, but there was no way he could answer those feelings with action. I see well. If you need anything, please let us know. That's how we'll do it, General Carveen. Understood. Oh, I forgot something. What is it, King of Darkness? The plan is for one of my spells to start the war, but I was thinking about having part of my army join the battle. I appreciate your permission. That is more than we could have hoped for. As he had been briefed earlier, Carveen accepted it immediately, but he did furrow his brow. However, the fight will begin within the next few days, possibly as early as the day after tomorrow. How far away are your forces? I am afraid we won't be able to wait for them. That's no problem. They ray already nearby. Nimble wondered about that. He hadn't spotted anything even resembling an army anywhere near the garrison. It seemed like Carveen wondered the same thing. Naturally, there was a thick security net of knights patrolling the perimeter. If anyone but Imperial forces approached, word would have surely reached the general. He looked to his subordinates in the area, his eyes asking if they had mismanaged any reports, but none of them seemed to have heard anything. Sorry. It may have been misleading to say they ray nearby. What I meant is, they can arrive at any time. I see Carveen didn't understand, but he decided to set it aside and asked a different question. How many are there? About 500, I say. 500. Carveen skillfully hid his disappointment, but Nimble didn't miss it. Carveen, the King of Darkness' forces, can line up alongside ours, correct. The Empire had to shed the most blood to demonstrate its loyalty to Aints. It would be preferable if his forces acted only in an emergency, but there would be no problems if they formed ranks together. 500 shouldn't require a change to our formation, and I am sure you would like your own soldiers to guard you. The implication was, please don't participate aggressively in the attack. To show the Empire's sincerity, it had to be the party shedding the blood. It wouldn't help their positions if Aints' forces did all the heavy lifting. Aints nodded in satisfaction at Nimble's comment. Nimble was secretly relieved, but when he thought about it, it was only natural. What could he expect to do with 500 soldiers anyhow? They were probably meant more as an honor guard than anything, but what happened next was beyond anything Nimble had imagined. Aints activated some kind of spell and spoke into space. Can you hear me, Sholtia? Open a gate here and send over the troops. Aints' eyes seemed to move behind his mask. All right, General, I've summoned my army. As he finished speaking, the commotion began. Something that appeared to be a dark half-circle appeared, floating behind Aints' gate. The word flickered across Nimble's mind. The gate opened, and the figures who emerged were all noise ceased. A strange atmosphere and a heavy silence dominated the space. It was as if the sound of stillness had flooded the area. The 500 soldiers appeared. It was a paltry amount compared to the Empire's 60,000. But it was impossible to underestimate a single one of them. The odd forces arrayed before them spoke louder than words. "This is my army." Aints merrily introduced his troops to the speechless onlookers. Intermission, the young girl seated in the sole chair throne of a luxurious, but not terribly large room raised her voice, which anyone would have said was innocent and befitting her age. "All right, I am leaving it up to you. Yes, Your Majesty, you can count on me." The man, who seemed to be a knight, stood up from his prostrate position in front of the little girl, his head bowed, before leaving the room in a self-assured manner. The door closed, and a few seconds later, the girl asked her prime minister next to her, "Is it okay now?" "Yes." He was the last one, so it's no problem. At the sound of the man's cool voice, the little girl's cute, naive expression crumpled. She sulked. That was the only way to describe it. Perhaps because she was tired, her eyes went dull and half-closed, her lips warped into a frown, and her shoulders slumped. "I feel horrible." She was acting less like a little girl and more like an exhausted woman in her 40s, but her voice sounded youthful. It was like her external youth had remained, but her insides had changed. "You must be tired." "I really am. I'd really like to quit this form." She picked up the hem of her skirt. "There's something disturbing about these clothes that leave my legs hanging out. I've told you many times, Your Majesty, but there's nothing that can be done." This girl was queen of the Dragon Kingdom, the black-scaled Dragon Lord, Draudolin Oreucules. She was called a Dragon Lord, but her combat ability was the same as any average person's. Incidentally, according to the Theocracy's criteria, she was a true Dragon Lord, but since it amounted only to the powers she was born with, she was also sometimes known by the rare term true, yet false Dragon Lord. The issue was that being true or false depended on whether one could use primeval magic or not. The reason everyone works so hard, if you ray in this form, is that it stimulates their urge to protect you. Does everyone have a lowly complex? I think being bigger feels better in all kinds of ways. Draudolin held her hands in front of her flat chest and jiggled them, miming something. "That form certainly does have its advantages. Don't say form, that's my real body. Do excuse me, Your Majesty." "Oh, Simone, I can tell you don't have any intention of apologizing whatsoever. That's not true." Gazing at her prime minister's cold smile and unable to read the emotions behind it, Draudolin averted her eyes in frustration. "You seem to understand. Back to the point, it's true that you might be more popular with men in that form, but that's not the case with women. In contrast, with this form, we can expect nice reactions from everyone regardless of sex or age. You understand that, I am sure. If you want to assume the other form, you should wait until after we make a breakthrough in the country's current situation. Do you have any bright ideas? Don't call it a form. That said, at the rate we're going, you'll be able to take whatever form you like. There will be no one left to see it anyway." The thought of the Dragon Kingdom's current state caused a heavy silence to fall between them. "So this Beastman invasion will be different from the others, without a doubt. I hardly think this great host's main objective could be the same as the piddling armies that have come up until now. Surely, they mean to bring down our nation. It seems like they're determined to put up livestock pens or something." Near the Dragon Kingdom was the country of the Beastmen. Beastmen were subhumans who were like lions or tigers, carnivorous beasts who walked on two legs. One look at their heads was enough to tell they were meat-eaters. Naturally, their diet included humans. Races that ate humans were rare. In 3 of the 6 great countries competing in the center of the continent, humans were food. In the Troll Country, a little removed from the central area, they were such human connoisseurs that the best food for entertaining guests was human fetuses that were about 6 months along. To meat-eaters like that, this country was just hordes of food gathered together. Up until this point, perhaps because the Beastmen had seen them as food that would multiply on its own if they let it be, there hadn't been a full-scale invasion. But for some reason, the latest attack was gigantic. 3 cities had already fallen. The feasting going on out there was enough to make even the Queen feel sick. Naturally, since there was no way to negotiate with this external enemy, the nation had come together to fight it. They were trying to cope, but beastmen simply had different base stats compared to humans. This was indicated by the fact that one of the major countries in the center of the continent belonged to the beastmen. Their physical abilities far surpassed those of humans. For example, if a human and a beastman grew up in the same manner, the beastman's stats would be 10 times greater than the human's in adventurous circles. They had established difficulty ratings, numbers measuring the strength of monsters. An adult human was rated at 3, while an adult beastman was rated at 30. Mysteriously, yet perhaps because average beastman's strength was so high, there were a great number of incredibly powerful individuals. That was the sole saving grace. A group of adventurers rallying around the adamantite plates is fighting them off, but they were outnumbered.